Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. We start today's program with a field trip. It's a field trip that's part of the Vermont Master Naturalist program. Throughout the Champlain Valley, the program teaches and trains participants about the natural history of specific sites, including the soils, the plants, and even the human land use history. To learn more, Rebecca Golan joined one of those trips.
I've got a different theory about why there aren't any tracks right there.
It's like going for a walk in the woods with Sherlock Holmes, but about nature.
Noah Hoffman is a middle school science teacher in Bristol. He's talking about a new opportunity that he's participating in. It's the Vermont Master Naturalist South Burlington program.
Cast your eyes this way. And what we're hoping to do is really expose the Master Naturalist candidates to the tools that they need to better understand their landscape and maybe apply that towards conservation or towards connecting other people in their town or in their city to their local landscape.
On this day, program coordinator Sophie Mazawita is leading a walk through Wheeler Park in South Burlington. She's teaching participants about the wildlife tracks they're finding along the way. And they are finding plenty, even though they're only a couple of miles from the heart of Vermont's largest city.
Even though there is a lot of human development, there's this tapestry of habitats that's interwoven between everything in South Burlington. And when we're out tracking and we're seeing fisher tracks and gray fox and red fox tracks within Burlington and South Burlington, you come to realize that we do have this pretty distinct special habitat here.
You might see little brown M&Ms, but I caution you not to taste any of them.
The purpose of the program is to educate the public about the landscape, wildlife, and natural history of the area through a series of field trips. Participants also engage in a community service project. South Burlington is one of 6 towns currently involved.
So our very first day, we actually got into kayaks at the beach at Red Rocks Park, took to the shoreline, and we were looking at all of the layers of rock in the Moncton Quartzite that spring up along the cliff edges there. And so just getting this different perspective and really diving into the story of why are those rocks there in particular, and what are the processes that cause that, and what does that mean?
Through the field trips, participants are led through the natural history of the area, taking into consideration what program leaders call the layer cake.
We like to go through what we call the layer cake, so starting with an understanding of the bedrock geology and then the glacial processes or surficial geology on top of that have created the landscapes, the physical landscape that we see. But of course, every landscape is connected, or each layer is connected to the others, and so that understanding of the bedrock geology can tell us something about the soils. When an animal is walking, it's just moving that 1 foot at a time, and so the trail's going to be fairly wide and it's going to be pretty stable.
I had a pretty strong background in geology and historical geology, but nothing that pertained to this region.
Dottie Rosenzweig moved to South Burlington from Brooklyn, New York in 2018. She had studied geology in that area and was drawn to the Master Naturalist program by the prospect of learning more about her new home.
When you know how the land got here, what it was before and how it got here, you have a sense of where it's going to go. Wind and water erosion are going to do their thing. It's not going to stay the way it is.
Like Rosenzweig, many of the participants have interest or experience that led them to the program, from geology or birding to wildlife tracking. The range of topics covered means that there's something for everyone to learn, even if they're already an expert in another aspect of natural history.
I like trees, but I didn't know what grows, what needs water, what doesn't want water, and I know that now. I'm learning that, and it gives you an appreciation of what it is that you're looking at and what creatures live where and why they live there and what do they eat and how do they find it.
Some fairly old sapsucker activity here. We are in an old sugar bush, and there is another sap feeder in our midst.
These experiences have really gotten me to slow down and look more closely at things like tracks and rocky outcrops.
For Hoffman, the program is providing the opportunity to learn new information to share with his students. It's also making him examine his own surroundings with a new curiosity.
Thinking more deeply about the story of the landscape and, and asking different kinds of questions than I was asking before about, what this might be telling me when I see that old fence or that old rock wall or track in the mud or something like that.
For these participants, it's about looking at the small details in order to get the big picture of a place.
The tracking and just like coming out and paying attention, I think there's just, such wonder and presence that can come from paying attention and deeper knowledge and understanding. And it's just amazing how much we're missing much of the time.
Teaching Vermonters how to see new details in the world around them. The Master Naturalist program is helping people connect the dots. In South Burlington, I'm Rebecca Gollin with Across the Fence.
Thank you, Rebecca. And joining me now is Executive Director of the Vermont Master Naturalist Program, Alicia Daniel. Thanks for coming in. This is terrific. What a great program. So tell us a little bit about your background and how the program began.
Sure. I began my training as a field naturalist at the University of Vermont 30 years ago. And I had an opportunity to study with Tom Sikkema from Yale School of Forestry and Art Johnson from UPenn. And they taught this great course that married the earth and life sciences. And I became passionate about this, reading the landscape from the ground up.
And you're Burlington's naturalist,
I am now
right?
Burlington's field naturalist. Yes, I'm at Burlington
so cool.
Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront, but I sort of cover the whole city, so yes.
So just why is learning about our natural environment important? Why is that a great thing for people to know?
Sure. Well, I don't have to ask myself that because I'm just totally drawn to it. I get outside and I'm curious and I'm passionate, but this Master Naturalist program, we're really not doing just a study of nature. We're connecting people to their town. So we very specifically help them learn about their town kind of in 5 chapters. We start with geology field trip. We move into the glacial history, which set up a lot of the parent material for our soils. We think of the winter times, kind of the post-glacial landscape when people arrived 9,000 years ago and were hunting mammoths, all the way to the Abenaki who live on the land today. And then the 4th chapter is the European settlement. These are big events that happened in every Vermont town.
And you can see evidence of them
You can see
everywhere.
Those stories written in every town. And they're a little different, so it's fun to go in and find out what is the real story of Bristol, what is the real story of Williston, how is it different than South Hero, and that's what we do.
Is that what makes this unique from other Master Naturalist programs nationwide, or they all focus on towns?
No, this is very unique to Vermont, and it's because of our design using this layer cake approach. In many Master Naturalist programs, and they're wonderful, but they tend to do it topically, like there'll be a 4-hour lecture or a 2-hour lecture on ferns, and you'll go out and spend 4 hours looking at ferns.
Right.
But I think of that as a pieces approach, and you can't learn all the pieces in nature. It's daunting. You can't know all the mosses and all the mushrooms and all the microbes. You might learn most of the large mammals, but so we'd rather look at patterns. Like Vermont is this quilted landscape. It's been sort of pulled apart and restitched, and so every little spot of it has its own story, and we look at that.
Is that what you were calling the layer cake approach? Is that what you mean by that?
So it is, the layer cake is more building from the ground up through the different layers. So it's thinking about how what we walk over really influences the natural communities and how the animals move in the landscape, and so that's that.
So the program that you have also includes volunteer teaching, so people are taking this Master Naturalist program. What is the focus on some of the town volunteer projects?
Sure, so the teaching is an element of it. There's this conservation education aspect that we want to incorporate. So our motto is advancing conservation, building community, connecting people to the wild heart of place. And we kind of do that in reverse, like we connect these 10 amazing or 15 or 17 master naturalists to where they live, and then they share out either through public walks, through school projects. We have a nature hip hop project going on in Bristol, which I'm hearing great things about. Or they might do a stewardship project, helping plant in riparian areas or bringing new pollinator habitat to their town. They might help monitor wildlife by tracking and using trail cameras. So it's all to increase the knowledge and the activity, the action, the activism, well, the involvement in the community.
Fantastic. And is it easy to find the schedule of those field trips if you aren't part of the program, but you still want to be on those trips? Is there a way to find
We
out?
generally, they're kind of emergent design at this point.
Okay.
We do want to get an event page up on our website, but right now we try to get the word out through Front Porch Forum.
Yeah.
We use all the sort of usual methods for letting people know. Sometimes they're posters and flyers.
And can anyone become or sign up for the Master Naturalist program?
Yes, I mean, there's certainly a population of people who are drawn to it, you know, who have a naturalist passion. And one of the first questions I ask people when we convene a team is, what layer are you most engaged in? What would you do out in the woods for a day? And so we have birders, we have geologists, we have people who love trees or mushrooms. And so there's usually a window that they're entering the program through that they've pursued. And then we just bring them all together.
So what's the cost? How do people apply that are interested?
So it's $425, and that's for the 5-day series, and you get a certificate, you know, at the end when you complete it. And I'm sorry, what was your last? Oh,
No, and
so,
how do people apply?
So if they go on the website, they can get an email address, and we have applications that are released in each town. We have a local coordinator.
Great.
We'll send those
so
out.
on your screen,
Yes.
the Vermont Master Naturalist masternaturalist.org. Thank you so much, Alicia Daniel,
Thank
the
you, Fran.
executive director of the Vermont Master Naturalist Program.
Thank you, Fran.
Once again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us across the fence.